Welcome to the Parenting with Impact podcast with your hosts Elaine Taylor-Klaus and Diane Dempster, co-creators of ImpactParents.com, an online community, award-winning blog, and service organization helping parents all over the world to raise complex kids become capable, independent adults.
Hi everyone, Elaine and Diane here, and we know that you want your complex kids to grow up to be happy and independent, and yet you're not always sure how or when to help with that.
In this podcast, we'll encourage you to collaborate with all kinds of complex kids and support them in navigating life and learning.
And we'll interview leading experts from around the world, as well as parents in our own community, talking about how training for parents actually helps these complex kids.
We'll talk about the issues we hear parents struggling with all the time and how a coach approach can support and empower your amazing young people.
We won't tell you what to do. We're going to help you figure out how. So let's move on to the next conversation. Welcome back, everybody, to another conversation in the Parenting with Impact podcast. And we are here today with, do you go by Andrea Brenner, or is there another name in there?
Andrea Malkin Brenner, yes.
Andrea Malkin Brenner.
A new friend.
And, who I met. We were both at the HECA conference in 2022, and that is a conference, it's a small organization that supports college counselors, basically. And actually, a member of our team, Scott Garbini, is really involved with HECA, which is how we ended up there.
Nice.
So welcome. It's great to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, why don't you start by just give us the backstory? Tell us how you got into what you're doing and a little bit about what you do.
Sure. I have a fairly unusual career path, which I love to share with students who think that they need to have a linear career path. So I was a sociology kid, studied sociology all through undergraduate, and then went on to get a PhD in sociology with every intent of teaching sociology at the college level, which is exactly what I did. And I was a college professor. I was a sociology professor at American University in Washington, D.C. for 20 years. And my area of focus was actually sociology of the first year student. And so I really worked very closely, not only with faculty on the college campus, but with staff, anybody who was student facing, from residence life to academic support, talking about where students, first year students, fail to thrive. And I'm not saying where they failed, but where they failed to thrive on the college campus. And it became clear that when American University decided to create a first-year experience program, which is a first-year transition course for all incoming, mandatory course for all incoming students, I was the one that they chose since this was my academic field. And so I created that course, and it actually won many awards in the country because it's not the only, it's one of the only mandatory full year courses that combines not only transition to college material, but also sort of talking across difference and learning to live with people unlike yourself. So after many years of that, I was at AU for 25 years. I decided, I really wanted something different. I went off on my own. I wrote a book called How to College with a colleague from AU. That book's become a first year common reads for many colleges, which is really exciting for us. And then what would happen, I would be asked to speak at high schools and colleges across the country. I loved it. I love working with parents. That was new to me. And the question I would get again and again, mostly from parents of neurodiverse kids was, I love your book, but my kid really can't sit and read a whole book. And so I created a card deck of conversation prompts for college-bound students and their parents called the Talking College Card Deck. And that card deck has, I'm thrilled to say it's done. Yeah, I've probably sold 40,000 decks at this point. But what's exciting about it is they're chunkable, doable, tactile cards, and they work for lots of different learning styles. And actually just coming out today, it's being delivered. The cards are being translated to Spanish, which I'm thrilled about because a lot of first-gen programs have started to use them, but the parents don't necessarily speak English as fluently as the kids. So that's kind of how I got here. And now I call myself a college transition educator, and I do a lot of traveling and speaking with high schools and colleges.
Lovely. That's such a great course.
Yeah, well, I know, college transition educator. I'm going to write that down. That's I like people with cool job descriptions.
Oh, thank you.
So
go ahead.
It was harmony.
So you started working with parents. You also have a framework. It's interesting. What I'm loving about your story is, parents come to us all the time. They say, well, you're going to work with my kid. We're like, no, we're working with you because you set the tone, you create the environment, you have the relationship with your kid. And what I hear you similarly doing is really focusing on helping the parent understand how to be in conversation with these young adults rather than focusing directly with the young adults. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Absolutely. And, I don't think it's black or white. I was actually just listening to a recorded webinar this morning when the host was talking about students receiving accommodations in college. And they said, this is a time to cut parents out completely. The student needs to call. And the point is, yes, colleges, without a FERPA waiver, colleges do require the communication with that student. That's you have to be realistic. And parents don't go from being their child's greatest advocate in the K through 12 system to being completely on the back burner, when that student enters college. And so I believe in this sort of transitional time where parents need to be clearly taking a back seat, but it's a slow process. And students don't go from dependent to independent overnight. And, I love to tell parents, think about what you're currently doing for your child that you don't need to do for your child, that your child is capable of doing, and also what your child can be learning to do. And so pretty much all of my work starting in 9th and 10th grade with parents is teaching those skills, right? But the parent playing a really large role in those conversation prompts. You say to a parent, talk to your kid about transitioning to college. Either that parent never went to college or the parent went to college 30 years ago. Life is very different. And so part of that is giving the parent the prompts, giving the parent the tools to help them work, and then encouraging other resources, academic coaching, tutoring, whatever, life skills coaches, executive functioning coaches. Those are important people in the student's team. And then ideally, when the student gets to college, they're not doing it independently, but they know how to ask for help. And that to me is crucial, especially in that 11th and 12th grade. It's teaching that asking for help is actually an adulting skill, right? And that's just some of my favorite language, because if you sit down with a bunch of adults and you say, what do you do if you don't know something? We're easily able to say, I Google it, I call an expert, I research online. If I'm in a crisis with a death in the family, for example, I call friends to help, right? But then we talk to high school students and we say, what does it mean to be an adult? They either say, it means doing it all on your own, right? Completely independent. Or they say, I have no idea. It's foreign to me. And I would love to, as a society, if we can start teaching high school students that adulting actually means finding your resources, not necessarily doing it all by yourself.
Well, and I want to
huge value for us. I just want to acknowledge what you're saying, because this is a huge part of what we teach all the time too.
Well, and I just had that conversation this morning with a mom of a 10th grader, and I want to go there, but I want to go back to what you said earlier, which is this takes time. This takes the kid being ready. And parents come to us all the time, freaking out. Oh my gosh, my kid's in 11th grade. They have to learn everything they have to learn to be on their own in exactly 14 months. And then I have to be completely out of it. And so part of this is setting up realistic expectations for the parent and the child, because sometimes these kids aren't ready to start learning these skills until 11th, 12th college age. And so it's about creating the trajectory based on where the kid is and where the kid eventually needs to be. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, I would agree with you wholeheartedly. I would say there's two pieces of that. One is, I mentioned earlier, chunking. You don't say to any teen, but especially a teen with executive functioning issues or learning processing issues, go get the ingredients and bake a cake, right? We can do that as adults. We've had experience, but we need to break down what that means, right? They need to know how to, maybe get to the market, use money, purchase the supplies, know what you have in the house already, measure, cook, etc. And so life skills are very much like that. We shouldn't say, just figure out how to get up on your own or just figure out how to keep your room clean. There are chunking pieces of it, right? We have to teach them those skills. So 11th grade is a little on the late side for the work I do, but it's never too late. So I think that's one piece is there's the earlier, the better to start manageable skills, even if it's just the first part, right? So you may not be ready to, kid, you may not be ready to make your lunch yet in fifth grade, let's say, but you are able to know that you're out of apples in your house and can write that on a shopping list. So whatever way, and every family's different, every student's different, but really being able to break that down into manageable chunks. I think that's a really important part of preparing for the transition. So you don't have that panicky 11th grade, I've got to teach my kid everything. The other thing I will say is that not every kid has to go directly to college. And COVID has been a blessing in disguise in some ways, because we have learned that there are multiple career paths and that college is a wonderful, wonderful resource, and certainly gives students and adults a leg up. But not everybody's ready for college. There are wonderful gap year programs. There are wonderful programs where students can learn some of those skills if they do not feel ready. Sorry, I keep babbling on. One more thing I would say is that one of the myths that I see again and again when I talk to high school parents is that they believe that their student needs to be 100% prepared socially, emotionally, and academically for college in order to go to college. Yeah. And I would say that's not true. Having worked with, tens of thousands of freshmen on a college campus, they're messy. They come in and that's okay. The 18, 19-year-old brain is not ready 100% in every avenue. So, your kid might have social anxiety, but they might absolutely knock it out of the park in the classroom. They might struggle with time management, but have no problem with social skills. So I love to tell parents, it's a myth that every student who's ready for college is ready on all of these different platforms.
It's so true. I had a parent educator who spoke to us when one of my kids was a senior that I'll never forget what he said, because it was so clever. And he said, your kids go off to college as high school seniors. They go back after Thanksgiving break as college freshmen.
Mm-hmm. It's powerful. Yeah.
And I thought it was really telling, because that it helps us begin to see that it's a process of transitioning, that it doesn't happen all at once. And when they first go, they really don't know what it means to be a college kid, but they do know what it means to be a high school senior.
Exactly. Absolutely.
And that notion that they have to be 100% prepared is a myth. So beautiful. Thank you for that.
Can we go back to this conversation about asking for help? Because this is such a key thing, is this life skill. And I love the way you said that. It's like adulting is about asking for help.
Absolutely.
So how do we normalize that? How do we make that?
So can I revise the question a little bit? Can I tweak it?
Sure.
What guidance do you have for parents whose kids are resistant? Because, we can tell them asking for help is a life skill, and we can model it and all of that. But a lot of our kids, especially when they're complex kids and there's some conflict with the relationship, some control issues with the relationship, the kids are resistant to receiving help.
And there's perfectionism and anxiety and all those sorts of things.
And control and all kinds of
stuff. Yeah.
Right. So I have a lot of answers. Well, first, I would say, let's think back to the fact that in elementary school, the kid who had their hand up was the kid who didn't know. And the kid who didn't have their hand up was the smart kid, right? That's a myth, of course, but that's where a lot of our students came from. If I raise my hand, it means I don't know, right? I'm dumb even. And that's such a different approach in college. College professors want the questions. The smartest kids in the college classroom are those that ask the next question, the next level. They're curious. So I think we're working towards that. And that's something that I do think that certainly coaches can work on, but high school teachers should really be working on as well. So I would say a wonderful place to start, and this can be done as early as 10th grade. And it's something I work with a lot of families to do, is parent student, they give 15 minutes of their time, maybe 20 minutes. They each have a piece of paper. They sit on opposite sides of the kitchen table so they can't see each other's paper. And they start to write down, the student writes down everything they think they need to learn about the world before they go to college. What don't I know? Here's my long list. The parent, during the same time, writes down everything they think their kid needs to learn before they go to college. And then they share the lists. And here's some interesting things. And I've done this with so many different focus groups. Here's some interesting things that come up. Many things are on both lists. And that is an acknowledgement, right? That, okay, here's a skill I think you need to know. Here's a skill you think you need to know.
Bonus.
That's wonderful. Now, that's where I would say, especially for the resistant kid, that's a great place to start. And again, they may not be able to teach that in one day. That might be a chunking activity. We're going to focus on this on the next month.
Next month, yeah.
And maybe it's not the parent that's going to be the teacher. Your brother is really good at this. Your uncle is excellent at this, right? How about the neighbor? She can help you with this skill, right? So it's not always the parent that's got to be the savior or the fixer or the teacher.
And often not the parent, often better when it's not the parent.
Yes. And to go back to your question about the resistance, I think maybe better if it's not the parent, right?
Yeah.
Here's another thing that comes up in this exercise. And I actually did it with my own kid, my youngest is a junior in college right now. This is a kid who grew up with the mom who wrote the book, How to College, right? He grew up as a baby on a college campus. And one of the things on his list was, I don't know how to do my taxes. And this has actually come up in many of the focus groups that students write this. And when the conversation happens afterwards and the parent says, well, honey, that's not something you actually have to know in the next couple of years. That's not something you have to do on your own to go to college. The relief that washes. Right. And there are other things on the list that that an 18-year-old brain, 16-year-old brain, however old you do this activity, it's a relief of I don't have to know everything about the world yet. So that is also a benefit of the activity, right? And then, of course, there are things that are different that are on the students' list, and the parent says, I think you actually know this, or a good part of this, or on the parents' list, and the kid says, I know that, and the parent says, well, this part of it, but not this part of it. So I believe it's a great activity to start the dialogue, and it works really well for kids, especially kids who are resistant, kids who think they know everything already.
Or resistant for a lot of reasons, because you're helping me remember when my middle kid, who's now almost 26, and when she was preparing to go off to college, she was a high performer, and she was stalling on looking at schools and applications and all of this, and she was really, really struggling. And we finally got to the core of what's underneath the conversation, and it's exactly what you're speaking to. She was afraid of adulting, and so she didn't. It's not that she didn't want to go to college, but if she proceeded in the process, it was going to bring her that much closer to adulting, and she didn't feel she had the skills. Yep. She's the one who thought she had to be 100% prepared.
There you go.
Well, and I think that's the piece of it is that, there's this perspective that college is adulting, and college is not at all adulting. I mean, it's that's part of why I think, I have a story that a lot of kids just having 4 years, if your kid doesn't go to college, give them 4 years before they have to adult, because that's part of the development process, right? So the parent who says, well, if you don't go to college, you got to start a career right now. And it's well, wait a second.
If they had the skill set to do the college, they might not, right? Yeah,
exactly.
Right. And some of my work in the first year experience space, and I work with colleges to create first year experiences. Some of that is exactly what you're talking about. Colleges know that those students are lacking in some of these adulting skills. So it's not just, finding the library on campus. It's not just finding resources, but it's also time management, how to interact with professors, talk to adults, leave a voicemail, write a professional email. A lot of first year experience courses, a lot of colleges are stepping up and saying kids are lacking coming in with some of these adulting skills. And some of these are bite-sized and manageable, and we can actually teach them in the first semester.
Well, and in my experience, another example of a way in which COVID kind of created this new wrinkle was that the college kids would get to campus, and the only people they had to talk to were the professors, because they didn't have upperclassmen there, because they weren't actually on a campus in the same way.
That's a good point. Absolutely.
And so then you have this other dynamic of they don't have students or peers to talk to, and they don't know how to talk to the professors.
Yes, I would agree with that.
Yeah. So, all right. So we do need to start wrapping up this conversation. So tell people how they can find out more about you.
Sure. Probably the best way is through my website, ambrenner, BRENNER.com, ambrenner.com. And through there, you can book me to speak at your kids' high school, or colleges can book me that way. My book is on sale there. My card decks are on sale there. But also I have a lot of articles. I do a lot of writing, a lot of my articles, other podcasts that I've been lucky enough to be a guest on are there. So lots of information. Following me on social media. I do lots of free giveaways. I advertise lots of webinars seminars, even for colleagues, because, I do have a bunch of high school families who follow me. So I would say ambrenner.com is the best way to get in touch with me. I don't do one-on-one counseling. I don't do one-on-one work with families, although I'm happy to answer questions, and I'm certainly happy to give referrals.
Fabulous. And we will make sure that the deck and the book and everything is accessible in the show notes as well.
I appreciate that.
I appreciate it.
Well, we've talked about so many different things today. Is there anything that we've left off that you're like, oh my gosh, we got to make sure we talk about this, or how do we wrap this conversation up?
Yeah. So I would say one of the important parts of working with college parents, and something I've realized over the last few years, is that when we watch our student walk away, as they leave us as still a high school senior, and we leave them on the college campus and literally drive away, we see the back of that kid. We see with the student with all their baggage, right? We see the student who struggled at this or that, the student who had to be picked up from the birthday party, sleepover because they couldn't handle it, the student who is the last one to tie their shoes. We see all of that stuff, but the college doesn't see that. And the college is ready to welcome a messy, not perfect first-year student. There are faculty and staff on college campuses who are, especially trained in working with the 18, 19-year-old brain. So do keep in mind, parents, that when your student leaves, and even though you see your small child leaving you, they are sort of being welcomed as a young adult, and they are moving to a place that has resources. And the key there is, you go on college tours, you go to info sessions, every college talks about the, hundreds of wonderful resources they have. And that's true, but they're useless if the student doesn't cross the threshold to get into the writing center or disability support, whatever those resources are.
And your student's not going to use those resources because you tell them to.
Correct.
Your student's going to use those resources when you enroll them in seeing the value to them. And part of what I love about what you're doing, Andrea, is that you're really inviting parents earlier to have conversations that enroll their kids in their own success. So
Yes.
We talk a lot about moving out of director mode and into collaborator mode. And what I see in your work is that you're really also guiding parents to become collaborators and then supporters, so that these kids are learning to take ownership of themselves.
Absolutely.
And that's a complicated process. And if you feel like you need some support with that, it's probably because you do.
Most of us do.
Right?
Yeah.
Because
we don't know how to do that either as parents, right? As much as these kids don't know how to.
Nobody taught us, right? We know how to be a director because that's what we've been doing.
We know how to be a fixer. We know how to be an advocate. We know how to be an organizer, a director. That's been our role and been an appropriate role.
Right. And now it's time to transition.
And that role changes. Yes.
Yeah. Great. Thank you so much for sharing, for the work you're doing, first of all, because I am really excited to share this with our community. And I think it's a beautiful synergy to the work we do in training parents how to have these conversations and how to move into collaborator mode. I think there's a lot of really good collaboration and complementary stuff going on. Yes. So, and I really want to acknowledge your path in kind of starting in one place and moving to another and seeing the need and filling the need and really making a difference on a much broader scale by applying what you learned. It's a great reminder for us and for parents and for kids to see that they're not going to have one path in their lifetime. They're likely to have many. So thanks for that. Anything else, Diane, you want to add?
As we close, Andrea, favorite quote or motto?
Yes, I knew you were going to ask me this. So my motto, actually my favorite quote is an Adam Grant quote. Adam Grant's an organizational psychologist. And he says, the real test of parenting is not what children achieve, but who they become and how they treat others. Yeah. And I just love that.
Yeah.
I do that too.
So true.
With that, parents that are listening, thank you, Andrea. Thank you, parents, for being with us. Thank you for everything you're doing for yourself and for your kids. At the end of the day, you make the difference.
Thank you so much, Diane and Elaine.
Take care, everyone.
You've been listening to the Parenting with Impact podcast with Elaine and Diane. For more information on the Impact Parents community or to join Sanity School for Parents, please visit impactparents.com. If you like what you've heard, please share this podcast with friends who need similar guidance and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. For the essentials of Elaine and Diane's coach approach to parenting, download a free tip sheet at impactparents.com/podcast.
Behavior therapy training for parents is actually recommended as a first-line treatment for complex kids. For information about Sanity School, our training program for parents or teachers, which has helped thousands of families around the globe, visit impactparents.com/sanityschool.